Hey y'all, you know what time it is. Get into it! Get into it! Yes! Hi, happy people. How's it going? Okay, so I gotta explain a couple of things. So, does anybody... Okay, this might be for my generation and the older crowd. Does anybody remember a cartoon character named Droopy? If you do, please comment below. He is one of my favorite animated characters. He is not a Disney character, nor technically is he a Warner Brothers Looney Tune. He is a Tex Avery cartoon character. Tex Avery was like, I guess you would call Tex Avery cartoons like the cousin of like Looney Tunes slash Tom and Jerry, Hanna-Barbera shorts cartoons. More so Looney Tunes. But Tex Avery cartoons were great. Lots of slapstick comedy, lots of singing. Actually, lots of singing, because there's one episode, Red Hot Riding Hood, and then there's one that's based, a cartoon short that's based off of Cinderella that involves this very suave wolf and this beautiful red-haired girl who portrays most of the female characters in those cartoons. But yeah, Droopy is my favorite because he was so melancholy. He was like the perpetual melancholy character. He was always trying. He was like, "Hello, happy people," because he just wants people to, acknowledge him and just be happy. And it was so funny because he just looks so sad all the time. So that's where I give my phrase, "Hello, happy people." And it's a neutral term that is inclusive to everyone. Because I think everybody can find something to be happy about. It is a beautiful Sunday evening, no clouds in the sky. However, for those who live in Ohio, I did hear we're going to get snow on Wednesday. You know what that means? It's Ohio, the land of four seasons. Better get out the bubble coats and wear your hat and scarves, because life is not a joke right now. The main reason why people get sick, especially when it gets cold again, is because they're in denial. Number one, yes, we do want it to be warm. That's valid. We get that. But you have to be realistic. Dress for the elements. I don't care if you're I'm just getting in the car and going to the store. You need to be wearing clothes. It's cold. Like gloves, hat, scarf around your mouth. You should be wearing your mask, but still something, because when you breathe in the cold air, that, especially for asthmatics as myself, that constricts your air capacity and it causes your lungs to weaken, which causes you, and correct me if I'm wrong, it causes respiratory problems that could later shift to bronchitis or pneumonia because you're breathing in all that cold air. Yeah, life is not a joke. Please take care of yourself, take your vitamins, and some elderberry juice would help too. It's delicious. But I don't own the music that we are listening to the background, and it is absolutely perfect for the chapter we are about to read. And we will begin. Chapter 14. The beginning of the end of the world. Slowly the door opened again, and out there came a figure as tall and straight as the girl's, but not so slender. It carried no light, but light seemed to come from it. As it came nearer, Lucy saw that it was like an old man. His silver beard came down to his bare feet in front, and his silver hair hung down to his heels behind. And his robe appeared to be made from the fleece of silver sheep. He looked so mild and grave that once more all the travelers rose to their feet and stood in silence. But the old man came on without speaking to the travelers and stood on the other side of the table opposite to his daughter. Then both of them held up their arms before them and turned to face the east. In that position they began to sing. I wish I could write down the song, but no one was present could remember it. Lucy said afterward that it was high, almost shrill, but very beautiful. A cold kind of song, an early morning kind of song. And as they sang, the The clouds lifted. From the eastern sky, and the white patches grew bigger and bigger till it was all white, and the sea began to shine like silver. And long afterward the east began to turn red, and at last, unclouded, the sun came up out of the sea, and its long level ray shot down the length of the table on the gold and silver and on the stone knife. Once or twice before, the Narnians had wondered whether the sun at its rising did not look bigger in these seas than it had looked at home. This time they were certain. There were no mistaking it, and the brightness of its ray on the dew on the table was far beyond any morning brightness they had ever seen. And as Edmund said afterward, though lots of things happened on that trip which sound more exciting, that moment was really the most exciting. For now they knew that they had truly come to the beginning of the end of the world. Then something seemed to be flying at them out of the very center of the rising sun. But of course one couldn't look steadily in that direction to make sure. But presently the air became full of voices, voices which took up the same song that the lady and her father were singing, but in far wilder tones and in a language which no one knew. And soon after that the owners of these voices could be seen. They were birds, large and white, and they came by hundreds and thousands and alighted on everything, on the grass and the pavement, on the table, on your shoulders, your hands, and your head, till it looked as if heavy snow had fallen. For like snow they not only made everything white, but blurred and blunted all shapes. But Lucy, looking out between the wings of the birds that covered her, and saw one bird fly to the old man with something in its beak that looked like a little fruit. Unless it was a little live coal, which it might have been, but it was too bright to look at, and the bird laid it in the old man's mouth. Then the birds stopped their singing and appeared to be very busy about the table. When they rose from it again, everything on the table that could be eaten or drunk had disappeared. These birds rose from their meal in their thousands and hundreds, and carried away all the things that could not be eaten or drunk, such as bones, rinds, and shells, and took their flight back to the rising sun. But now, because they were not singing, the whir of their wings seemed to set the whole air a-tremble. And there was the table pecked clean and empty, but the 3 old lords of Narnia still fast asleep. Now at last the old man turned to the travelers and bade them welcome. "Sir," said Caspian, "will you tell us how to undo the enchantment which holds these 3 Narnian lords asleep?" "I will gladly tell you that, my son," said the old man. "To break this enchantment, you must sail to the world's end, or as near as you can come to it, and you must come back having left at least one of your company behind." "And what must happen to that one?" asked Reepicheep. "He must go into the utter east, and never return into the world." "That is my heart's desire," said Reepicheep. "And are we near the world's end, sir?" asked Caspian. "Have you any knowledge of the seas and lands further east than this?" "I saw them long ago," said the old man, "but it was from a great height. I cannot tell you such things as sailors need to know." "Do you mean you were flying in the air?" Eustace blurted out. "I was a long way above the air, my son," replied the old man. "I am Ramandu, but I see that you stare at one another and have not heard this name. And no wonder, for the days when I was a star had ceased long before any of you knew this world, and all the constellations have changed." "Golly," said Edmund under his breath, "he's a retired star." "Aren't you a star any longer?" asked Lucy. "I am a star at rest, my daughter," answered Ramandu. "When I set for the last time, decrepit and old beyond all that you can reckon, I was carried to this island. I am not so old now as I was then. Every morning a bird brings me a fireberry from the valleys in the sun, and each fireberry takes away a little of my age. And when I have become as young as the child that was born yesterday, then I shall take my rising again, and once more tread the great dance." "In our world," said Eustace, "a star is a huge ball of flaming gas." "Even in your world, my son, that is not what a star is, but only what it is made of. And in this world you have already met a star, for I think you have been with Corican." Is he a retired star too? Said Lucy. Well, not quite the same, said Ramandu. It was not quite as a result as he was set to govern the Duffers. You might call it a punishment. He might have shone for thousands of years more in the southern winter sky if he had all gone well. What did he do, sire? Asked Caspian. My son, said Ramandu, it is not for you, a son of Adam, to know what faults a star can commit. But come, we waste time in such talk. Are you yet resolved? Will you sail further east and come again, leaving one to return no more, and so break the enchantment? Or will you sail westward? Excuse me. Surely, sire, said Reepicheep, there is no question about that. It is very plainly part of our quest to rescue these three lords from enchantment. I think the same, Reepicheep, replied Caspian, and even if it were not so, it would break my heart not to go as near the world's end as the Dawn Treader will take us. But I am thinking of the crew. They signed on to seek the seven lords, not to reach the rim of the earth. If we sail east from here, we sail to find the edge, the utter east. And no one knows how far it is. They are brave fellows, but I see signs that some of them are weary of this voyage and long to have our prow pointing to Narnia again. I don't think I should take them further without their knowledge and consent. And then there's the poor Lord Roop. He's a broken man. My son, said the star, it would be no use, even though you wished it, to sail for the world's end with men unwilling or men deceived. That is not how great unenchantments are achieved. They must know where they go and why. But who is this broken man you speak of? Caspian told Ramandu the story of Roop. I can give him what he needs most, said Ramandu. In this island there is sleep without stint or measure, and sleep in which no faintest footfall of a dream was ever heard. Let him sit beside these other three and drink oblivion to your return. Oh, let's do that, Caspian, said Lucy. I'm sure it's just what he would love. At that moment they were interrupted by the sound of many feet and voices. Drinian and the rest of the ship's company were approaching. They halted in surprise when they saw Ramandu and his daughter. And then, because they were obviously great people, every man uncovered his head. Some sailors eyed the empty dishes and flagons on the table with eyes filled with regret. My lord, said the king to Drinian, pray send 2 men back to the Dawn Treader with a message to the Lord Roop. Tell him the last of his old shipmates are here asleep without dreams, and that he can share it. When this had been said and done, Caspian told the rest to sit down and laid the whole situation before them. When he had finished, there was a long silence and some whispering, until presently the master bowman got to his feet and said, What some of us have been wanting to ask for a long time, your majesty, is how are we ever going to get home when we do turn? Whether we turn here or somewhere else, it's been west and northwest winds all the way, barring an occasional calm. And if that doesn't change, I'd like to know what hopes we have seeing Narnia again. There's not much chance of supplies lasting while we row all that way. That landman's talk, said Drinian. There's always a prevailing west wind in these seas, all through the late summer, and it always changes after the new year. We'll have plenty of wind for sailing westward, more than we shall like from all accounts. That is true, master, said an old sailor who was a Galbian by birth. You get some ugly weather rolling up from the east in January and February, and by your leave, sire, if I was in command of this ship, I'd say to winter here and begin the voyage home in March. What you'd eat while you're wintering here, said Eustace. This table, said Ramandu, will be filled with the king's feast every day at sunset. Now you're talking, said several sailors. Your majesties and gentlemen and ladies all, said Rhinoth, there's just one thing I want to say. There's not one of us chaps that was pressed on this journey. We're volunteers, and there's some here that look very hard at that table and think about King's Feast, who are talking very loud about adventures on the day we sailed from Cape Paravel, and swearing that they wouldn't come home till we found the end of the world. And there was some standing on the quay who would have given all they had come with us. It was thought a finer thing to have had a cabin boy's berth, on the Dawn Treader than to wear a knight's belt. I don't know if you get the hang of what I'm saying, but what I mean is that I think chaps who set out like us will look as silly as those duffel puds if we come home and say we got to the beginning of the world's end and hadn't the heart to go further." Some of the sailors cheered at this, but some said that was all very well. "This isn't going to be fun," whispered Edmund to Caspian. "What are we to do if half those fellows hang back?" "Wait," whispered Caspian. "I've still a card to play." "Aren't you going to say anything, Reap?" whispered Lucy. "No. Why would your majesty suggest it?" answered Reepicheep in a voice that most people heard. "My own plans are made. While I can, I sail east in the Dawn Treader. When she fails me, I paddle east in my coracle. When she sinks, I shall swim east with my 4 paws. And when I can swim no longer, if I have not reached Aslan's country or shot over the edge of the world in some vast cataract, I shall sink with my nose to the sunrise, and Peepacheek will be head of the talking mice in Narnia." "Hear, hear," said a sailor. "I'll say the same, barring the bit about the coracle, which wouldn't bear me," he added in a lower voice. "I'm not going to be outdone by a mouse." At this point, Caspian jumped to his feet. "Friends, I think you have not quite understood our purpose. You talk as if you'd come to you with our hat in our hand, begging for shipmates. It isn't like that at all. We and our royal brother and sister and their kinsman and Sir Reepicheep, the good knight and Lord Drinian, have an errand to the world's end. It is our pleasure to come to choose from among such of you as are willing, those whom we deem worthy of so high an enterprise. We have not said that any can come for the asking. That is why we shall now command the Lord Drinian and Master Rince to consider carefully what men among you, the hardest in battle, the most skilled seamen, the purest in blood, the most loyal to our person, and the cleanest of life and manners, to give their names to us in a schedule." He paused and went on in a quicker voice. "Aslan's mane!" he exclaimed. "Do you think that the privilege of seeing the last things is to be bought for a song? Why, every man that comes with us shall bequeath the title of Dawn Treader to all his descendants, and when he land at Cair Paravel on the homeward voyage, he shall have either gold or land enough to make him rich all his life. Now scatter over the island, all of you. In half an hour's time I shall receive the names that Lord Drinian brings to me." There was rather a sheepish silence, and then the crew made their bows and moved away, one in this direction and one in that, but mostly in little knots or bundles, talking. "And now for the Lord Roop," said Caspian. But turning to the head of the table, he saw that Roop was already there. He had arrived silent and unnoticed while the discussion was going on, and was seated beside the Lord Argos. The daughter of Ramandu stood beside him as if she had just helped him into his chair. Ramandu stood behind him and laid both his hands on Roop's grey head. Even in daylight, a faint silver light came from the hands of the star. There was a smile on Roop's haggard face. He held out one of his hands to Lucy and the other to Caspian. For a moment it looked as if he were going to say something. Then his smile brightened, as if he were feeling some delicious sensation. A long sigh of contentment came from his lips. His head fell forward, and he slept. "Poor Roop," said Lucy. "I am glad. He must have had terrible times." "Don't let's even think about it," said Eustace. Meanwhile, Caspian's speech, helped perhaps by some magic of the island, was having just the effect he intended. A good many who had been anxious enough to get out of the voyage felt quite different about being left out of it. And of course, whenever any one sailor announced that he had made up his mind to ask permission to sail, the ones who hadn't said this felt that they were getting fewer and more uncomfortable. So that before the half hour was nearly over, several people who positively sucking up to Drinian and Rince to get a good report, and soon there were only 3 left who didn't want to go. And those 3 were trying very hard to persuade others to stay with them. And very shortly after that there was only 1 left. And in the end he began to be afraid of being left behind all on his own, and changed his mind. At the end of the half hour they all came trooping back to Aslan's table, and stood at one end while Drinian and Rince went and sat down with Caspian and made their report. And Caspian accepted all the men but that one who had changed his mind at the last moment. His name was Pettincream, and he stayed on the island of the star all the time the others were away looking for the world's end, and he very much wished he had gone with them. He wasn't the sort of man enjoyed talking to Ramandu and Ramandu's daughter, and it rained a good deal, and though there was a wonderful feast on the table every night, he didn't very much enjoy it. He said it gave him the creeps sitting there alone, and in the rain as likely not, with those 4 lords asleep at the end of the table. And when the others returned, he felt so out of things, and that he deserted on the voyage home at the Lone Islands and went and lived in Calorman, where he told wonderful stories about his adventures at the end of the world, until at last he came to believe them himself. So you may say in a sense that he lived happily ever after. But he could never bear mice. That night they all drank and ate together at the great table between the pillars, where the feast was magically renewed. And the next morning the dawn treaders set sail once more, just when the great birds had come and gone again. "Lady," said Caspian, "I hope to speak with you again, when I have broken the enchantments." And Ramandu's daughter looked at him and smiled. So there it is, Caspian and the daughter of the star. It's going to be very pivotal for the next book. And that, unless you all want me to read further on, we only have 2 chapters left, and I will be back tomorrow. Unless you all would like me to read further on. Because, as I try to gather, I've got so many books. Got it. Uh-oh, almost dropped it. Okay. Alright, so we got our next book, which is The Silver Chair, which is my... Horse and His Boy is definitely up there as one of my favorite books of all time, one of my favorite Chronicles of Narnia books. But it's like Horse and His Boy and Silver Chair are tied. They're like neck and neck. They're amazing stories. And then the last battle. And this one is actually really, really sad. So please be prepared, and it is incredibly dark. But for all intents and purposes, it is meant that way. And the last battle is going to feature a lot of characters we've read in previous books, so be prepared for that. But yeah, I think it'd be a good time to just end. But thank you, Scott and Janae, and anybody else that's been watching. Like I said, we'll be finished with this soon. And thank you all for those who've been patient with me. I just needed to take a break with everything that's been going on. I feel a lot better. Quite happy. And now I'm going to eat some shepherd's pie I made yesterday. But peace, love, and hair grease, y'all. Please like, share, subscribe on the YouTube channel. Please, 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 please. If you would like your friends or your family or your friends of the family or your kids to watch Storytime with Chris, go to the YouTube channel. Peace, love, and hair grease, y'all.